This is horrible reasoning. The idea that being pro-life rather than simply being anti-abortion is a thing is in and of itself a smokescreen for progressive ideology. There is no way to be pro-life without being anti-abortion. It does not exist. What does it mean to be pro-life? Is it just anti-abortion? Well, in 1973, Roe versus Wade was passed in the Supreme Court. And what would be one of the most despicable decisions in Supreme Court history. Since 1973, there have been nearly 65 million elective abortions reported in the United States. For reference, according to the Black Book of Communism, communism has killed 94 million people. Nazi Germany only, I can't believe I just said it, only killed 6 million Jews. This is why the pro-life movement is so important and why, after 50 years, Roe was overturned and celebrated by the pro-life movement. But we weren't done. That wasn't supposed to be the ending. That was just the beginning of the fight. Now, recent comments by former President Trump infuriated people like myself, at least, when he said his administration would be great for women's reproductive rights. This is commonly used as a euphemism for abortion in pro-choice circles, pro-abortion circles. And then to make matters worse, J.D. Vance, his vice president nominee, insisted that Trump would veto any legislation that federally outlawed the practice of abortion. Now, here's the thing. I understand that in part, politics is politics and political expediency must be factored into the equation. I get that. I get what politics is doing. I actually even understand what Trump is doing. I hate it. I understand what he's doing, trying to remove abortion as a central talking point because it's the only consistent talking point that Kamala Harris ever has. She's flip-flopped on every position except for abortion. Donald Trump trying to take that off of the table. But here's the thing. Donald, you're not going to get pro-choice people to vote for you. It's not going to happen. So just double down. Drives me nuts. Anyway, the culture has a death grip on this death work. And so he's trying to distance himself from it. And I kind of get it, but I think it's morally abhorrent and cowardice. Okay. So for those of us who are plugging our nose and voting for the former president, it was a slap in the face. And we should say as much. We should stand up. If we're going to vote for him, we should be the loudest people to stand up and say, this is wrong. This is not right. This is not why we voted for you. Lila Rose, who's a pro-life activist, has been excoriated by people from the right on her anger towards Trump and this administration for betraying the pro-life movement. And I get that people are afraid Trump's going to lose, but getting mad at people for calling Trump to account when he is clearly playing into the pro-choice verbiage is absolutely unacceptable. Now, on the other hand, never Trumpers are coming out of the word work with gleeful I told you so bravado, saying things like, oh, never Trumpism is vindicated, or see, there's no real pro-life party. But these dunks, to me, they ring hollow. You people traded your pro-life cards in 2016 when you refused to vote for Donald Trump and risked Hillary Clinton installing the most pro-abortion and radical leftist agenda in modern American history. Now, the response is usually this, and this is a response I got from somebody on Twitter, and then he deleted the response, but the response is usually this. Well, other conservative candidates would have installed similar judges to overturn Roe versus Wade. And I agree. But that's not what Never Trump was about, was it? If that was the case, it wouldn't be Never Trump. It would be, as I was, Never Trump in the primaries. I've never voted for Donald Trump in a primary. In fact, this year I wrote Ron DeSantis in the Republican primary because I didn't want to vote for Trump in the primary. But your argument, the Never Trump people argument, wasn't simply that another conservative should have been the candidate. I get that one. That was my argument too. Your argument was that Trump would be worse, than Hillary Clinton, and that was objectively false. Objectively false. To save your meaningless victory laps, please, especially those of you who choose to vote for and encourage others to vote for Kamala Harris. We are not the same. I am forced into this untenable position. You chose it. You chose pro-abortion rather than simply pro-states on the issue. You support someone that wants to federalize Roe into law and overturn state laws on the issue. We are not the same. And I am an abortion abolitionist, but I'm also trying to be as practical as possible. I understand how impossible abolition is if we let the federal government reinstate Roe as the law of the land for all 50 states. I don't want that to happen. I understand people who cannot bring themselves to vote for Trump. I get it. maybe because of this betrayal, maybe for other reasons. I get that. In a lot of ways, I resonate with them. I don't agree with them, but I resonate with them. I don't think that they are sinning if they refuse to vote for Trump or vote for third party. Tim Stratton and I have differences of opinion on this issue. I don't think that's the case. Although I have said, if you're in a swing state, I think you have to be very, very careful in how you calculate that decision. But I do believe that people are, if they actively vote for and encourage voting for Kamala Harris to stop Trump from winning. So yes, there are two calculations to make here in my mind. The first is what the pro-life movement wants to accomplish, and the second is what it can accomplish. And I write as much in my pro-life incrementalism article that will be posted in the description below. So even after all of this, I have supposedly pro-life people, mostly the ones voting for Kamala Harris, telling people to vote for Kamala Harris, telling me things like, look, abortion rates didn't go down. In fact, they went up after Roe was appealed. So maybe we should vote to keep it legal so we can fight to simply lessen abortion, since making it illegal doesn't seem to work. I've heard this so often. It is very, very frustrating to have to listen to this. I've heard it so often. And in fact, a few years ago, there's a well-known person from the right, or at least from Christian circles, named Phil Vischer, who did VeggieTales, and he released a video. It's pretty ironic because he released this video. You can see it there. Now, I reviewed this video a little bit on Facebook. Maybe I should do it again here on YouTube and go back to it. But he released this video talking about how, pro-life presidents haven't overturned Roe in so many years. You know, what's ironic is less than 2 years after that video, the justices that Donald Trump got on the Supreme Court overturned Roe. And so his argument kind of blew up on itself. So I discussed that even with a friend online, and I've seen this argument making the rounds again. Well, the pro-life people, if they're really just for less abortions, they should just let it be legal and then fight the good fight that makes it for less abortions. I had a friend, and I discussed this on Facebook recently, that the two seem to be mutually exclusive. You can either have less abortions or you can make abortion illegal. In fact, a well-known progressive on Twitter named Mason, I don't remember his, I don't know quite how you pronounce his last name, Meninga, I think, said, if the goal of the pro-life movement was to reduce abortions, it would support policies that have been proven to reduce abortions, but it's simply about criminalizing people who get abortions. So this is this moral, if you were really pro-life, you would just support policies that would limit abortion. So we had this conversation. I said the pro-life movement isn't about making all forms of murder illegal. So he says, you're admitting the point isn't about reducing and criminalizing. I'm saying it's a both and. You want to do both. He says the problem is reducing it and making it illegal are incompatible. And he's using the example that was recently found out that over 1 million abortions occurred still, even though Roe is overturned, and there are these other laws. So they're incompatible because for a year now, Roe's been overturned, and in that year, we've seen abortions increase. Now, let me tell you, that's frustrating and difficult to stomach as a pro-life person, but that is not a good argument. That is not a good argument, and I'll tell you why. Okay, it's a false dilemma, and it operates under the assumption that a law is only just if it completely eradicates or lessens a behavior. This is untrue. It is almost the same exact argument that pro-trans activists use when they say, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son, when they're talking about transition of kids. It's a manipulative argument to get you to be on the defensive rather than to be proactive in it. As if transition was actually real when they say that too, right? So I've had multiple people bring this argument up to me recently, so I want to shift from the political expedience of it to the pro-life argument for it, to say, how do we respond to this objection? This objection and the idea that real pro-life people would vote for Harris in this election is not only untenable, but morally wrong. So somebody from the American Solidarity Party recently wrote this on Facebook, and I've got another overlay here. They recently wrote this. But I want to suggest that if you live in a purple state and if you're pro-life, and not merely anti-abortion, then Harris-Walz should be your choice in November. Okay, and then they went on to say in the same post, abortions have hardly decreased post-Roe. They've merely shifted to locations. The most consistent and reliable way to decrease abortions is by providing the socioeconomic support necessary to maintain the health and well-being of pregnant people and families. Pregnant people. How about pregnant women? How about that? Can we say that? Kamala and Tim have consistently and reliably championed such policies, and there's no reason to think that they will not continue to do so at the federal level. There's a big reason. There's a big reason, because they're pro-abortion. They don't simply. It's not that they even want to see abortion go away. They want to see more abortions. They're fine with it. But this is despicable reasoning. Even if it was the case, this is horrible reasoning. The idea that being pro-life rather than simply being anti-abortion is a thing is in and of itself a smokescreen for progressive ideology. There is no way to be pro-life without being anti-abortion. It does not exist. You cannot be pro-life without being anti-abortion. Furthermore, the policies put forth by Kamala and Walz will most certainly not be better for life. I've covered that on another podcast. We'll have something coming out soon. What she means in this scenario is that the socialist programs that seek to wage a war on poverty is the best way to limit abortions, because then mothers feel like they can afford to take care of their kids instead of, murdering them. So let's take a look at the logic behind this argument using a few examples, okay? What if I said to you, well, genocide shouldn't be illegal since it's become illegal. It's not really radically changed. It's just shifted locations. There's just genocide happening in different areas in the world. Now, is that an argument for keeping genocide legal? As long as we can keep, genocide to an acceptable level, why make it illegal? We could do programs where we can separate people so that there's less genocide. I don't think that would be a just law. I don't think anybody would like that. So, or here's a more apt comparison. The Emancipation Proclamation was made in 1863. The Civil War concluded in 1865, and slavery was officially abolished in the United States shortly thereafter. But what if I told you that currently in the United States, according to the Global Slavery Index, we have about 1,091,000 slaves in our country? Now, you might be surprised that that's the case. Probably a lot of people are. But that doesn't make it false. In fact, that's true. We have 1 million. In fact, we have more slavery in the world now than at any time in world history. So what if I told you that the total amount of slaves in the year 1800 was only 1 million? So it's gone up 91,000 since 1800. It's also true. Well, that would indicate what? That so long as we can keep slavery to a certain threshold, since we have more slaves now than we did in 1800, it's acceptable? And you go, well, we had millions of slaves eventually. Well, that's true. That's true. And we made it illegal, and then the numbers went down. Perhaps we should experiment with making slavery legal so we could maybe lessen it. Maybe if we made it legal now, there would be less slaves. What if someone had that argument in 1850? The best way to mitigate slavery is to give people subsidies so that they don't have to own slaves. Would that have been good, even if it worked? Or do we see slavery as morally reprehensible and something that ought to be illegal and be punished for if you commit slavery, if you buy a person, if you use them to your own gain, if you consider them property? Should slavery only be illegal if the illegality of slavery limits the number of people enslaved? Or should slavery be illegal because it is a moral evil and any just society should make it illegal? Any just society, any society that makes it legal is unjust, regardless of if slavery shifts locations or not. And some could argue, well, slavery's just shifted locations. I mean, there's more slaves in the world now than there's ever been. Really, it's just shifted locations. Shouldn't we make U.S. slavery legal again? Because then at least the slaves here, they would have a better life. I mean, think about the slaves in other places. In fact, slaves here could have better manufacturing conditions. We could bring manufacturing jobs back from China, and China would not have slave labor anymore. We'd have more slaves here. They'd have less slaves. Wouldn't that be more just? Perhaps we could even limit slavery in other countries by instituting slavery ourselves, just like I'm saying there. Now, are you pro-human rights? Are you pro-human rights, or are you just simply anti-slavery? Now, I'm being kind of snarky. I'm sorry, but it infuriates me. It frustrates me that this is a line of argumentation. Of course, the pro-life person wants to limit abortions. Of course, every life lost to an abortion is a tragedy and unjust and a horrible blight on the history and the moral structure of this nation. Of course, God is going to judge us harshly for what we've done to the least of these. Many, many, many people will have that millstone. Of course, it's devastating that the abortion pill is so widely available and is able to be transported and shipped across state lines, even though medication isn't supposed to be able to be shipped across state lines. Of course, all of that. But that doesn't mean we stop. It means we shift strategies. The idea that just because abortions went up this last year, which is awful, means we should throw up our hands and say, well, you know what? Abortion was going down, even though it was still 800,000 abortions a year. Abortion was going down at least before Roe was overturned. So we might as well just go back to that. No, we just got to shift strategies. This is a new fight. We're barely in it. We can't give up. So number one, the target should be the abortion pill. It needs to be eradicated, or at least initially, the ability to transport it across state lines should be eradicated. Number two is target federal legislation. It's frustrating that Donald Trump is not going to sign federal legislation. Number three, local legislation. As long as we can keep Harris out of the White House, where she has promised to make Roe the law of the land, which would overturn a bunch of pro-life laws in the states. No one ever talks about that. Federally, it would overturn all of them. It would supersede all of them. So if she isn't able to do that, we can fight at the local level. In Nebraska, where I'm at, we're fighting. We're fighting to make not just abortion unthinkable, but to make it illegal. And number four, Supreme Court appeals based on personhood pursuant of the 14th Amendment. Is a baby a person? Is an unborn child, a preborn child, a person? If so, then the 14th Amendment applies and you can't kill it. So even if it were provable, even if it were true that abortion doesn't decrease with illegality, a dubious proposition at best, considering we have 1 year of data suggesting that. And this Mason guy, he said, do you think abortions weren't happening before Roe? They were happening, but after Roe, there was a spike in abortions. You can look at the statistics, a spike, because it was legal. So we don't actually have enough data through enough years to make this proclamation that, the two are untenable. We can't pursue either of them. We need to pursue mitigating murder. We need to find an acceptable level of murder so that we can feel good. And we just need to kind of pushing that acceptable level down. Or how about this? We should pursue all murder being illegal. So, for instance, if the pro-life position was only to limit abortions, as if a certain amount of murder being illegal to keep other murders from happening would be okay, then we could do the purge, right? Yeah, you ever seen the purge? It's like, all crime is legal for one night. Maybe we should do that. Then murder statistics would probably fall because at least some murders would be illegal. It's disgusting. Murder should be illegal. Full stop. Finally, the other reason this argument fails is precisely because the other side is not content with the laws that are in place either. If abortion access is so available and the rates are going up so fast, and that even though it's illegal, the two aren't compatible, then why do you want a federal abortion law so bad? Why institute Roe as the law of the land? And don't tell me because you want less abortions, because that has never, as far as I know, been Harris's or any other pro-abortionist advocate's statement. I've never heard any of them say, let's make abortion legal so there will be less of them. What you're asking conservatives to do here, what you're asking us to do is accept the premise of safe, legal, and rare. Saying, why don't you just go back to that? And I get that that kind of is Donald Trump's thing, because Donald Trump is a 90s Democrat and he's moving the excuse me, he's moving the Republican Party into 90s Democrat land. But that's not where I'm moving. I'm not going to move there. Just because I vote for that man, because the alternative is so much worse, doesn't mean that I'm going to move with him there. So I've only heard this argument in order to get pro-lifers to compromise or to get people to soften their consciences so that they can excuse voting for a baby murdering group like the DNC. And people might get mad for the way I'm saying, well, this is divisive. This isn't Christian. This is Christian. Jesus said, it is better for a millstone to be tied around someone's neck than to lead one of these little ones astray. I don't want that millstone. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say it. We know that these statistics won't keep this way for long. That's why the argument's being made right now. That's why people are saying, oh, vote for Kamala Harris and Walz because, you could limit abortions that way, because they know as states will start to institute laws, as the pro-life movement will gain its footing again, that the abortion pill will start to be illegal to cross state lines, that they know the pro-life movement will keep pushing, and that years down the road, abortions will lessen and laws will become more just because it's illegal. How do I know this? Well, in the half year following the Roe decision, before there was a concerted effort to push and produce the abortion pill nationwide, regardless of state lines, abortion went down by over 30,000 babies in the state of Texas alone. Look, to be pro-life is to be anti-abortion, and to be a Christian ought to be pro-life. We cannot equivocate on this issue. We cannot equivocate on this issue. Be pro-life and anti-abortion. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that's for our show for today. God bless. And as always, stay reasonable.